What is up, all you GBA type people? This is Tom, here bringing you guys week 2 of the power rankings. As we've been going on with our little experiment of different people every single week, I hope you all enjoyed Bird last week. I saw some very positive feedback. Now, on the same sort of idea, I'm going to provide you a new co-host for this week. He is someone you guys are all familiar with, a very good competitor in leagues such as the UBC, a very good friend of mine. Please introduce yourself.
Hey GBA fans, it's Choice CJ, and just in case you guys were sick of me, I decided to sneak into another GBA video this week. So, hello and thanks Tom for having me.
To be fair, I asked him because I know for a fact that he is one of our better analysts, and you know, with the fact that we lost Burke, I know CJ is more than competent and more than capable of stepping in where I know Burke took care of a lot of the things that the analysts did for last season's and seasons previous. CJ, I'm very excited to have you on as always.
All disappointment from here.
The bar is set so high for me to not hit.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway.
So we're going to start off. Number 10 hasn't changed. CJ, I'll let you talk about it.
Yeah, so at number 10, we do have Magic Activator, coach of the Memphis Grizzlies. And after sort of getting blown back in week 1, he did put in a pretty admirable performance in week 2 with just a 1-0 loss. And there were some positives that I'll highlight here. I did think that he did a good job of preparing for Mega Lopunny, with the Venusaur, the Lando, and the Arcanine all being good threats. Sets like the Quick Feet Jolteon were pretty nice. So he had some good prep, but there were some problems in the execution. Not being able to get up rocks because he didn't have it on his team was a big issue, and I'll let Tom talk more about exactly why that is in a moment. It really put him in tough positions where Volcarona was going to do a lot of damage to the team. It was able to hit Venusaur with a big Psychic, and Venusaur was a really bulky pivot for his team. It put him in a tough position in the late game versus the Staraptor because he needed to cover for the switch into Registeel with the Kartana. Facing down that Staraptor, he could have clicked the Smart Strike to just straight up kill the Staraptor, but he needed to click Sacred Sword, and just because of not having rocks up, the Staraptor is at a range of HP where it wasn't going to kill, so it just made for a tough situation there. And at the end of the day, really not having the right Lando set was really detrimental for him. And I just in general, a comment about his team, it's very balanced, which I think is not a good play style in this generation. I think more offensive teams are better, and that's not to say that he doesn't have his own offensive mons. Obviously, he's got Kartana and Lando, which are amazing offensive mons, but I just don't like things like Venusaur and Melodic in this generation. So I think he's sort of learning the hard way that that's sort of fallen out of favor in a lot of people's eyes. So I'll hope that he can bounce back in the following weeks, but I think he's going to have to make some adjustments for that to be the case.
So here's the thing with Magic, alright? I am going to say the nice thing first. I loved the Quick Feet Jolteon solely because it outpaced Mega Lopunny, and it also outpaced, in the case, a Scarf Staraptor. However, he committed the cardinal sin of team building, and that's bringing the wrong fucking Pokemon and lazy prep. Alright, you go into the game, and you click your 6 Mons, and you're all happy and go lucky into your live recording, but you fucking bring the wrong Lando. I'm sorry. That's up there with, running return on something and not having max happiness. Sorry, Dan. But they're like simple things, little things. Checking your Pokemon before you go into a match. Checking items before you go into a match. Very little things that you can do. And in this case, he commits not only 1, but 2! No Stealth Rock on Landorus. You're looking at a team that has Volcarona, one of the biggest things you need to have rocks up against, besides the likes of Charizard and Weavile to an extent, and Kyurem Black, the biggest, hardest hitters that you need rocks up for, and a Staraptor, which totally blew back his team regardless of what defensive mon he brought. But you don't bring Stealth Rock, so you allow those things to just rip through your team. Such boneheaded mistakes that can be so easily repaired. I don't understand how coaches go into matches, especially Wi-Fi matches, where they are looking at the 6 Pokemon they brought before they lead into the click record button for my cute little live recording and not be, effective on their preparation, because that wins you or loses you the match. Another note, even though he did bring Quick Feet Jolteon, he was far too reckless with it. far too aggressive with it and let it die before he even had a chance to check or otherwise KO Bolt's the Raptor, Megalopony, which then allowed both of them to win in the endgame. Additionally, because of his lack of stealth rocks, Sacred Sword doesn't kill the Staraptor. He loses to Staraptor and Megalopony in the late game, loses 1-0 in a very close match that he probably should have won had he used his fucking brain and played the match and came into the match like the well-prepared coach that I know he is. Step it up because it's not impressive. 2 weeks now that you've gotten busted by a team with Magirna, and now you just make dumb mistakes. It's week 2. You have 7 more weeks to fix it. Otherwise, you're going to get lost. You're going to get caught behind the pack. You know, there's some very good coaches that are currently, you know, they're undefeated. They're on really good hot streaks, and he's kind of fallen behind. His prep and his play is not really that impressive. Would you be inclined to agree with me, CJ?
Yeah, I think he really needs to step it up, that's for sure. So number 9, we both have Papa C and the New York Clinkz. Papa C did go up against its Gregulater 60 this week, and he was unfortunately hit with a 4-0 loss. And Nihilego was just a tremendous threat versus Papa C. There wasn't a whole lot that he could do once it got that speed boost up. There were some good things. I think that the Pidgeot, was a big threat. One thing that was odd, though, was that he brought HP Water instead of HP Ground. I'm not really sure what that was supposed to cover. I think that just the Hurricane, Heat Wave, Hidden Power Ground coverage hits the whole team. It hits the Celesteela, which besides Nihilego is the only other reasonable switch in to the Pidgeot. Another bring that I thought was questionable was the Haxorus. It was pretty much stopped hard by Celesteela, and he already had a good setup sweeper being the Tailglow Manaphy, which actually was amazing versus Greg. So maybe something like Hoopa to break through Greg's Fat would have been better. Another note on the Manaphy, that was the number 1 threat versus Greg. I don't understand why Papa C switched it in on the Marowak. He already knows that it's an offensive Marowak because it outsped the Serena earlier in the game. You just do a calc and you know that even a Flare Blitz is doing almost 40, assuming that the Marowak has Thick Club. I don't think that playing that way with his win con is very good. And he did the same thing in week 1 as well. He brought Manaphy in on Aster's Metagross, took 2 Thunder Punches, and it was dead. You to be really careful with your win cons because then what happens is exactly what happened in this game. You end up getting blown back by Beast Boost Nihilego.
The thing about the HP Water, I was thinking for a second, maybe it was to not get entirely walled by Celesteela, but like you said, Heat Wave, yeah, good point. Don't really know why he didn't bring HP Ground. I mean, it didn't do enough to things like Nihilego. But in terms of Papa C, I like how he's using Rotom Frost to an extent. However, it's not a good Electric Resist because it's not an Electric Resist once rocks are up. And even though it hasn't really been a liability for him in the long run, it's just been kind of a faltering point. He's used it to check other electric types. In this case, Volt Switch from Rotom Mo. But it didn't really last that long. Did die very quickly. Did get a burn off of Megalade, which was cool. However, like you had said, he did lose once he set up the Z-Rain Dance with Manaphy. Cool for Greg to stay in. He knew for a fact that, if either Marowak was dying or, in Papa C's case, he went for the Rain Dance. But like you said too, the way he's using Manaphy these past 2 weeks haven't really been that impressive. We see Manaphy be bulky and live stuff and get proper setup and come in and really threaten out things with its natural bulk and Space 100 speed, which is good against other lesser walls. And for being a water type, it does have a vast move pool to threaten things out. But he's used it in the same way he's kind of used Hoopa U. They're threatening, but they haven't lived up to their potential. And that's kind of a detriment. But allowing it to go down did allow Nihilego to sweep. He just has kind of had a vast number of misplays. He put Greg in the driver's seat. He knew for a fact that Nihilego and Celesteela were very good in the matchup, and once certain things went down, certain things got weakened, it just put Greg in the driver's seat the entire way. He had no control, and for the 2nd week in a row, he's getting just kind of blown back by things that he recognizes as a coach. This is a problem, or how do I address it, but then just kind of falls short to it. You can't blame the matchup for too much longer. Once you're 0-4, you're kind of out of the race, considering there's only 4 playoff spots. A lot like Magic, he has to pick it up, otherwise there's really going to be some problems moving forward, and he's going to, it's going to be a disappointing season, and I don't want to see that. At number 8, we have Jack of the nor Whittington, nor Skitty. And the thing is with him is that Jack has a very interesting way of teetering on this very fine line between winning and losing. In this case, yes, he won with very decent prep against a coach who lost on his own subpar prep. At any point in this match, Jack could have lost. And that says a lot about his team and the build of the team and how he's, unfolding his preparation leading, and his plays into the match. But luckily for him this week is that Magic kind of lost the match for him. And I kind of feel like this is the way that he's gone to his first 2 weeks. He's going to lean more towards losing just because, like I said last week, it really doesn't have a focus, really doesn't have a means of going into a match with a clear and concise game plan, such as the likes of Greg, who was like Neoliga was going to sweep. His team kind of just comes in. Does Volcarona do work? Cool. Does Megalopony do work? Cool. If they don't, well, better luck next week. There's a lot of potential, or there was a lot of potential for 50-50s at the end of the match that could have lost Jack the match. Granted, he did get them right. He did win, which is good for him. But he needs to have a more concise idea, win-con, way of winning, track of into the win than he did this week. CJ?
Yeah, so I agree with you in that he did benefit from a little bit of the mistakes that Magic made, particularly not having rocks, because that allowed him to play pretty boldly with his Volcarona. He's switching in Volcarona on Venusaur pretty frequently, switching in on Sludge Bombs and things like that. I do like Life Orb Volcarona. Most people do think of the Quiver Dance sets, of course, but it doesn't really need the +1 boost in order to do a lot of damage, especially to a team like Magic's, which is balance. So Volcarona can really blow through things like that. The Skuntank set was really cool. It did stop all of Magic's walls. Bandage Staraptor is best Staraptor, no doubt about it. Yeah, I would agree with you just about the team in general. Like, he could have easily gotten into a situation if rocks were up where he wasn't nearly as effective this week. And it could have easily been the other way. I'm looking forward to seeing how he can plot a course towards victory a little bit more clearly in future weeks.
So moving on from there, we have Greg. It's Gregulator. And, Greg this week did get on to a very nice win, beating Papa C. I did like his Speedy Marowak. It was a very nice direct counter to anything Serena could have did, whether it was high jump kick, or it was leaf kick, or it was trying to spin. And it was nice. It was nice to see that actually work out. And of course, having the Thick Club really did put a lot of hurt on Papa C's team. There were many no drawback plays that Greg could have utilized in terms of going close combat with Mega Gallade. Nothing really on the team wanted to take that, especially when he's facing a Rotom Frost, which, albeit burned, can still knock out a Rotom Frost. It's Rotom Snowball. It disintegrates. Alolan Marowak with Ghost Stab hit a vast majority of Papa C's Pokemon, barring the Mega Pidgeot, but then again, no real right-minded person switches in a Mega Pidgeot to a Marowak. And then finally, of course, Volt Switch, the biggest thing against Papa C's team that just was so uninhibited, no ground type, don't switch in a Haxorus to a Rotom Cut, and he just kind of got that pivot out constantly, which eventually led him into the Neoligo, which then eventually swept. Now, even though at the turning point, I would say, the match where Greg had the matchup between Alolan Marowak and Manaphy, expecting Surf, sacking off Alolan Marowak, he did make the smart play staying in, and it ended up removing all of Papa C's momentum, all of his capabilities to take on the Celesteela and Neoligo, which then eventually allowed Greg to win. Played very smart. He got things working out in his favor with the Neoligo sweep, maintained control throughout the entire match, and it was very impressive, and I appreciate what Greg is doing this week. Keep it going. I want to see more wins from you. It's fantastic. Simply fantastic. Go ahead.
Yeah, Greg did a great job of identifying that Papa C's only electric resist, or immunity rather, is the Sand Slash, and Sand Slash doesn't switch in on Rotom. So what's nice is that he could then easily Volt Switch on the pivot that Papa C made into Serena and threaten the hell out of that thing with the Marowak, with the Neoligo, and things like that. Greg, all he needed to do was get enough chip on that Manaphy, and Neoligo's going to sweep. Even if the Manaphy had clicked Surf instead of Z Rain Dance, and the Marowak goes down, like, Neoligo just gets 5 kills instead of 4 kills in that case. So, really good job identifying that. And, Greg's team, I do think it's better than people give him credit for. It is on the slower side. He only has the Sneasel topping out at 115 as like a real big burner. And obviously Gallade at 110 is nice, and Zygarde is a big threat. But, I still like his team. I just think, we need to go on throughout the rest of the season and figure out if we're going to get week 1 Greg, who's like a little bit kind of unfocused, or we're going to get week 2 Greg, who like really knows exactly what he needs to do, and he's going to absolutely execute his game plan and get a dominating victory. I'll be eager to see which Greg we get going forward.
See, I'm inclined to agree with you on that point, because I know for a fact that Greg has been maybe a little unmotivated, uninspired even, to build and obviously prep and play. But I think that with this sweep, I know would definitely, and I'm sure you can agree, put a little bit of wind in my sails moving forward. A nice 5-0, 4-0 sweep it compels you forward to actually continue playing at that level, continue getting those sweeps and impress. When you go and you get a bunch of losses, it sucks. You want to upload, you feel like crap, then you get a nice win like that, you're like, hell yeah.
To piggyback off that comment, you're right. Like, having a nice dominating win like this, it puts a lot of energy into you, and you could tell by the end of that game that Greg was having a lot of fun. And like you said, there's no better motivator than that.
So next up, we have Randy. Now, we didn't mention the spots where these coaches are. All 5 of these spots we actually matched up on. The only real difference is going to be from 1 to 5 or 5 to 1, what have you. Next up, we have Randy of the Texas Rangers. Now, from Team Preview, you notice no Celebi, no Nidoking. Leo recognized this too immediately. No Stealth Rocks. Does certainly allow Leo to bring in things such as Mega Arrow, and absolutely uninhibited. It also prevents Donphan from potentially having its sturdy broken, so it can't be 1 KO'd, or otherwise guaranteed get rocks up, whatever. Now, I knew this was going to be a problem, and I knew it was going to be a giveaway for his opponents to put them more at ease. Okay, rocks aren't coming up, which means I don't need to rapid spin with Donphan. Essentially what I'm saying is just that he needs to either pick up another rocker, or he needs to kind of bring one of the two, ensure that his opponent maybe does have to hazard removal at some point, or have those rocks up to get that passive damage. To continue on that rocks comment, it really hurt him since a lot of the chip damage would have facilitated many more KOs. And like I said, just allowed Leo to not play as freely, especially when it came to Reuniclus. We saw this week that Leo brings Regenerator, AV, Reuniclus. Randy specifically says, I don't know what this Reuniclus is, so I'm going to go into Hawlucha and bust my Unburden and try and get the sweep. However, he would have saw that it was Regenerator prior to, revealing the Hawlucha Power Herb set, had he actually gotten rocks up. On that note, this is why that's important. Because you get to see that type of stuff. You can see, oh, Reuniclus comes in, doesn't take rocks damage. It's Magic Guard. It does take rocks damage. It's Overcoat. Pfft, no one runs that. Or it's Regenerator. Final note, he's playing very predictably, very straightforward, and Leo capitalized on that. That's the bottom line. Just basically took the reins after like turn 6 or 7 and said, I know what you're going to do. I know how you're going to play. The Fire Fang against the Mega Scissor was a prime example. Really just rode the entire game.
Yeah, that's my number one comment as well, is that Randy was on the back foot for practically this entire game. And that's just sort of Leo's play style. He does like to make aggressive doubles and make predictions to try and gain himself momentum. And Randy just could not combat that. One big thing that was a big issue for Randy throughout the match was, as you mentioned, not getting up rocks, because it really made Mega Arrow a threat. Mega Arrow did get 3 kills in this game because just after that initial turn of taking the bullet punch damage, Mega Arrow did not get touched again this entire game. Rocks would have put it in range of the Shadow Sneak from Muck, and it just was a huge issue. And along those lines, I don't understand really why Randy played his Meloetta the way that he did, because once the Scissor went down, Meloetta was his only chance of getting damage on that Mega Arrow. But he just stayed in versus the Finny, versus the Reuniclus, going for Hyper Voice repeatedly. Sure, the damage was nice, but you need that Meloetta in order to take out Mega Arrow, or else you're going to get swept. The first week, he did a good job of saying, okay, Tapu Koko is going to be my win con. I'm going to play patiently, and wait for the opportunity to do that. I think he sort of lost sight of what he needed to do to win in this game. And whereas he played patiently in the first game, just to echo off the comment you made, he sort of brought in Hawlucha too early, and he needed to scout for the Regenerator Reuniclus before he tried to sweep. So hopefully in the next game he can sort of return to his week 1 form where he played, a little bit more thoughtfully and kept his win cons and, sort of played to set himself up for that. In this game, he just really set himself up to get swept by Arrow.
Was it with coaches this week letting their faster Pokemon that checked the primary things that busted their entire team just die too early? Like, what's going on?
Yeah, I don't know. People, I guess maybe they're nervous because it's the GBAD league and they want to impress people, but, you just need to calm down and focus and play Pokemon like you would normally. We have a lot of talented coaches, and a lot of people know that. So,
but CJ, clearly the GBA is rigged. Hello.
Clearly.
So I will make at least one tongue-in-cheek reference every single week. Next up, we are going to talk about Dan, our first discrepancy in terms of rankings. I have Dan at number 5, you have Dan at number 4. Let you go first.
Dan wasn't able to rekindle his week 1 magic with the Magearna. I think the Trick Room Magearna was a smart bring, but he just didn't have a great set for dealing with that Rotom. You do need to give some props to Jolt for keeping his Rotom in the back the whole time, but I don't think Hidden Power Rock was necessarily the right call. And Dan did bring Steelium Z on his Magearna. I don't actually know what he brought that for, other than just good general damage on annoying stuff like AV Torn. But, maybe he could have brought Akaberry, because he did know that Rotom was going to be the switch-in to Magearna. That's why he brought HP Rock. Of course, hindsight's 2020, so I guess we'll move along from that point. The Absol was a really good win condition versus Jolt's team, and with that being said, I think he played it a little recklessly. He said in his video that he anticipated the Colbur Mew, but brought the Absol in anyway and went for a knockoff versus it. If he could have gotten off just a little bit of extra damage, and then he could have brought it in, and there was really nothing that stopped an SD Absol. And, the Absol was on a timer because of the toxic spikes, so just all that little bit of damage was really important. If he could have kept more HP on the Absol, it could have really finished off Jolt. And then the other thing that I really want to mention, and I'm sure you'll talk about this too, is that the return not being max power due to the happiness. Yeah, I'm sorry, it's a little cringy. Just because it could have changed the way that this game played out. Not gonna theory mon, but you just gotta make sure that those things are correct, because it really screwed up his strategy in this game.
That's like my other cardinal sin. Not checking your mons, and checking your items, and not checking return. I said it before already. It's very simple, especially for someone who I know that gens so often to check your mons, especially checking happiness. I know that when you gen something and it comes over to your game, happiness tends to reset to 70 unless you set yourself as the original owner of the Pokemon. But you still gotta go check it. There's a person, I know that there is a NPC in every game that says your happiness is this. Obviously, you need that maxed out. Like you said, had he had max return, things would have been different. Damage output would have been much more significant, and Jolt would have recognized that. And he said it in his video. If return did a lot more damage to Scolipede, not as big of a problem. If it did a lot more damage to just anything in general, those Pokemon become not that big of a problem. The bottom line is, check your shit. I'm saying it twice now. Besides that, lack of hazard removal really showed this week. T-Spikes were very effective, and Magic Bouncers only do so much. I feel like he didn't see T-Spikes coming to an extent, and not only were they super effective against his team, because Mega Absol was not Mega Evolved, or because he didn't bring Espeon, it just allowed them to get set up. He can't do anything about them, and the rest of his team, got worn down so quickly. It was remarkable. I sound like Donald Trump there for like a split second. That was the image that just jumped into my head.
Sorry. I'm gonna stop laughing now.
It's funny. No, it is. I'm not sure I believe in Dan's team as much as I did after week 1. Just after this match. It's kind of sad to say. He does have Magearna. His team is very fun in terms of preparation, and it's fun to watch. And he is a great, a great producer in his videos. I love the edits. But needs to tighten up the pregame preparation and especially the long-term vision. I can see what he's going to do. He just needs to do it, but not let his opponent ride him too early, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And I do have him just one spot higher than you because I agree with what you're saying. I still think that Dan prepped well. It just is unfortunate that he went up against a good opponent. Things like the Rocky Helmet, Tangrowth were good brings, but Jolt was just able to sort of outsmart him and play around that. So at my number 5, your number 3, actually, we do have Leo, 6-foot hacks, coach of the Durham Druddigons. Leo was able to bounce back after a pretty disappointing loss in week 1. He was able to really apply the pressure to Randy. Leo really, you could tell that he was back in his comfort zone this week. He was just kind of caught off guard by Jolt's setup in week 1, and the nerves really got to him. But in this week, he was making all the plays that we see Leo make all the time. He made the bold play turn 1, staying in with the arrow, getting up rocks, switched into Salazzle, but then doubled back into the arrow on the anticipated muck switch in. Things like that, he was just doing all game. And I really liked his prep this week. The Raichu, the Reuniclus, even the like quote-unquote bulky Salazzle. I thought they were all really smart brings on his end.
Wish Raichu?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, it's sort of, the creative sets like that allow him to really succeed. And it really caught Randy off guard. I don't think that he was anticipating such a Raichu set. He was kind of expecting his Koko to sort of plow through just like it did in week 1. But Leo wasn't going to allow that. He sort of misplayed around the Meloetta a little bit just because he let his Finny get weakened when it didn't need to get so weakened, and then he switched in his Reuniclus. But in the grand scheme of things, that wasn't as huge of a deal. The Mega Arrow, again, the fact that he identified there's no rocks and that he could abuse Mega Arrow, I think that's part of the reason, too, he was willing to stay in with Mega Arrow on turn 1. If he knew that it wasn't an Adamant Scizor, that his Arrow would live pretty comfortably, and then he could get up his rocks and just kind of go ham with Arrow later on in the match. Like, it was just good foresight on his end, and it just sort of shows us the caliber of player that he is.
It was a very dominant match, another prime showcase of how he makes good doubles. He has a very high awareness of not only his opponent's team, their possible switches, and of course the damage output provided by his opponent's team. I love how he, like you said, how he bounced back. It is very impressive, and it shows that he is certainly a competitor and someone that is meant to be here and meant to compete amongst a lot of the other coaches that may be right near him or, of course, above him. He had a good prediction, like I said, when I was talking about Randy, the Fire Fang versus the Mega Scizor. He saw it coming, and it lessened the offensive pressure against Leo heavily. He's safe but effectively aggressive, if that makes sense, against his opponent. His predictions are on point, and even if they're not, if he tries to make a double, they just seem to work out. Things that I have no idea how to do, like I don't know what doubles are, because when I think I'm going to make a double, it's like, oh, this makes sense in my stupid brain, and then it doesn't. When they make a double too, and it's like, okay, gotta switch out anyway, so back to square one. Also, I'm going to start a thing. It's called the Inaccurate Attack Watch, and this week we have Stone Edge from Leo, because last turn of the game has to hit a Stone Edge. Last week, he and Jolt had the inaccurate move face-off between Torrens Hurricanes and his Hydro Pumps. And like I said, when we did the team breakdown, his team is probably going to be one of the biggest abusers of inaccurate moves. I don't want it to bite him in the ass, even though it probably will. We are going to move on to Abe and Aster's match. And I'm not going to move Abe, mainly because of the fact that the game did not want him to win. Plain and simple. This game really didn't like Abe, and the bottom line with his match is that Hacks really wanted him to lose, and it did. Specifically, the crit clanging scales, which Specs Komodo this week, was fantastic. While it did put Aster's Crest in kill percentage for anything basically on Abe's team, it really wasn't super detrimental. Inversely, the Leaf Storm miss against the Infernape. Now, if it did knock Aster into Salic range, maybe a different game, but it didn't. So, that miss was kind of big. It did take all the momentum that I think that Abe was building up and just removed it. But then you really want to talk about something that mattered. The stupid flamethrower, 10% burn chance that he got against Mamoswine really put a good amount of work, and it threatened out Salamence entirely, regardless that it was defensive. And because it was burned, Abe knew for a fact that he could live. He did live, and it just took advantage of it. I think that was super unfortunate that RNG just kind of gave him the big one in this case. I'm not going to move him because I do think that you remove... Basically, we play a game of numbers and rolls and luck. And unfortunately, you are either on the receiving end, me, or you're on the giving end, mostly not me. And it sucks. So I feel for Abe this week. I do believe that he will bounce back because his team can do so. And he is in the top percentage of this, this league. I have him at number 4. You have him at number 3. I'll let you talk about him.
Going into this week, I don't think I really liked Abe's team all that much. After this week, I came away liking it quite a lot. He just has so many good wall breakers on his team. I love things like Embor and Primarina that can just blow teams back. I thought his prep was really smart. You mentioned the Specs Como-O. The reason I think that was great is because his number 1 switch into that usually is going to be Aster's Metagross. Of course, Aster didn't bring the Metagross, but the idea would be that you could break down the Metagross and clear the way for Superior to sweep, because that was pretty much the win con this week. So to weaken the number 1 check to that, I think is really smart. And it's just things like that Abe does well, and I'm looking forward to see in future weeks. Being able to really craft a team that's going to set him up for success. He had a good matchup in this game, because of those wall breakers that I mentioned and the fact that Aster's team is pretty fat. His team is actually even slower than Greg's. His fastest mon is the Thundi at base 111. I think the fact that, his team is actually slower is overlooked because Infernape and Thundurus are both good Scarf mons. Whereas I don't think Greg has the same natural Scarfers besides maybe Rotom-Mow. So he had the wall breaking power to break through the fat, but then he also has stuff like Beedrill, which is a menace versus all of Aster's offense. So it's, as you mentioned, it's pretty unfortunate that things didn't go Abe's way in the match in terms of missing the Leaf Storm, getting burned, and things like that. Because I think that if those things hadn't happened, it could have been different. But I know that Abe is going to bounce back and really come through with this really amazing prep. And I know that he's going to do well.
So because we are here in the power rankings, and I am doing the power rankings, we are going to keep things controversial. So for my number 2, your number 1, we have Jolt. Now, I don't think Jolt's number 1. I'm not going to talk about that. I am going to talk about the fact that, he did have a very nice, immediate burn against the Chomp. I did think that it kind of mitigated a lot of the damage that Garchomp could have done against his team, even though Garchomp did rack up a very easy kill, let's be honest. But the T-Spikes, 100% was the game changer in this match. Threw Dan's plans off a lot, and it forced Dan to play not only under a timer, you would say, but it's all or nothing. Either he gets the damage in now, or over time, Jolt just completely ruins out the HP of Dan's Pokemon, getting 12% off, including recoil, including, responding damage, stuff like that. So Jolt did a really good job in that regard. I liked his Ice Beam tech for 2 weeks in a row now. This week for the Tangrowth, and last week for Donphan against Leo on Mega Kangaskhan. That investment, even with no investment, damage and a half of Ice Beam super effectively against an opposing Pokemon that probably is running Rocky Helmet. He's doing a fantastic job of showing why Mega Kangaskhan is still a threat, even without Seismic Toss. His prep, his play, his T-Spikes, very smart, so refined, so keyed in, but so not number 1. I do think the return Misgen really did help him out. Like I'm sure you're going to say as well, it allowed him to play almost unscared of the Licky Licky, because Dragon Tail's only going to do so much. Unstab, not really that big of base power. Return, max investment from a Licky Licky is still going to do a sizable chunk, had it been max happiness. God damn it, Dan.
Yeah, I think he's number 1 because of his team. The Mega Kangaskhan, isn't a Mon that's going to be at the top of the leaderboard necessarily, because I think at this point people sort of understand what you need to do to counter Kang, but Jolt's smart enough to anticipate that, and that's why he brought the Ice Beam like you mentioned, and it was perfect because the two defensive answers, Garchomp and Tangrowth, are blown back by that. And that's kind of why I still am iffy on Kang on whether it should be allowed or not. Yes, it's not going to be like the #1 kill getter, but it forces a certain play style. Like it forces certain sets. And just to be sort of centralizing like that makes it sort of hard to prepare for. But, you know, props to Jolt for taking advantage of that. There are lots of people who don't and just want to bring power-up punch sets every week, and then they get destroyed. The other thing that I really like about Jolt is just in how he plays, and he never plays the same way each week. You saw in week 1 that he was playing very aggressive, going for lots of setup, and it made a lot of sense versus a player like Leo, who is also aggressive. So, you know, so he wants to take advantage of that. But in this week, his strategy really was to set up those T-spikes early and just sort of slowly let his opponent's team go down. And we saw that the Scoliped's Toxic Spikes killed the Darmanitan, it killed the Absol. If GBA counted Toxic Spikes towards kills, Scolipede would actually be the kill leader.
Stop that. Don't you suggest that to these people.
I'm not suggesting it, it's just an observation. So like just setting that up and, you know, just building the way that he did and having that strategy where he just wants to wear the team down and then come in with Tornadus and click Hurricane a few times. It's very good. I've just been nothing but impressed with Jolt, and I think he's got the team and the skills to remain at the top of this league.
So for #1, I have Aster. You have Aster #2. Let's talk about him first.
Yeah, so Aster is got a really great team. I do really like it because it does have a good combination of offense and bulk. And he really knows how to use that bulk. Like the Salamence, I love defensive Salamence. I think bringing that was really smart because, you know, otherwise Beedrill really blew him back. It's just the only thing with going up against Abe this week is that, you know, if you have the right wall breakers, I do think you can break through Aster's bulk. So that's just going to be a little bit of a concern for me going forward. I really liked the Salac Berry Infernape, as I'm sure you did as well. I think it was actually just a little risky to bring this week because Mamo is forced to run the Ice Shard this week because of the Salamence. So if you have this Infernape that's at, you know, pretty much 1 HP because it goes for the Endure, you know, you can get a kill, but if the Mamoswine is healthy, you're going to get immediately killed. He also ran Adamant Infernape with enough speed for an Adamant Rachi, which I think was also risky because max speed Rachi, you know, Jolly Nature or Timid Nature does make sense for potential DD Ments. So he took a little bit of a gamble and, you know, it definitely did pay off for him because that Infernape ended up sweeping the entirety of Abe's team. But that being said, like, you know, Aster really prepped well this game. And, you know, we've talked about there's a few teams or coaches in this league who don't necessarily have a strategy going into the game, but he knew that, you know, his Infernape, he had to get rid of the Como-O in order for it to sweep. He really wanted the Thunder Punch so he could take on the Primarina instead. You know, if he got that Thundurus in, that was in a really good position to sweep. So he's got good vision. It's just, you know, I think that this week exposed a few flaws in his team, and that's just pretty much the only reason that I haven't put him at #1.
The Salac Infernape was risky, but, I mean, you look at some of the sets that have been brought historically throughout the GBA. Things like, I mean, Caliente that from Geo. Looking at it from that week's perspective, was it risky? Hell yeah, it was risky. What if Shay didn't lead with Melodic? You know, he didn't get the Scald off. He didn't activate the weakness policy. He didn't get up Solar Beam, the Sunny Day. Solar Beam never happened, and therefore we have the Legend. Right? If that never happened, we'd never talk about it. I think this was a good risk from Aster's end. 2 notes about the match overall. I like how both teams brought the Swine evolutions. Aster having Piloswine, Abe, Mamoswine, and they roughly did the exact same thing. Set up Stealth Rock, and then die. Yeah. Each player both had a very, very good Ghost type in terms of how it threatened their opponent. Rotom threatened Aster the same way that Spear Shackle from Decidueye Abe really didn't have a switch-in for. But, you know, one minor, like super minor critique was just that Aster mentioned that he wanted to get rid of rocks, or after, I should say, he got up rocks himself and really couldn't get them back up. Because like I said, the Swines were dead. In addition, I did also like the fact that he had enough EVs in terms of crest to do about 25% to bulky superior based on what he perceived Abe's spread would be for a bulky sub superior. Now, it was close on some of the rolls. The crits, yeah, those mattered, but he was still in a range that it was a roll, and it wasn't necessary that, you know, he was under 25% every single time. Very good anti-sweep preparation that, to an extent, did kind of work out for him. Now, here's why I'm keeping Aster at number 1. He was more in charge this week with his sets. Not only that, but hacks did help out Aster, but I don't think it was as detrimental as it was for Dan not running, you know, max happiness on return. In addition, I just feel like Aster is more creative in terms of his preparation. He's more interesting to watch. His skill, I think, is a little bit more refined, a little more interesting. And in addition, it's just his team is far more cohesive. Jolt has the bulky offense going on. Aster has the cohesiveness between super scary offense, super annoying bulk. Umbreon and Cress make me want to vomit all the time. And even though he doesn't have a dragon type, it's, I don't know, I just like Aster better. And I'm going to keep it number 1 until he is no longer undefeated like Jolt. Whoever is undefeated will stay at number 1.
Yeah, I can definitely respect that. Aster, yeah, did bring a lot of really creative sets this week, and his team is working as a good unit. And I hope that, you know, that these guys can both win their week 3 matches, because I believe they play week 4. And I think that'll be a really good turning point for this season. It'll sort of dictate who's going to be the person on top for the rest of the season.
That is your power rankings for the week. I hope you all enjoyed. I think CJ and I had some good laughs. I think this was a little bit more casual than how last week was with Bird, and maybe a little bit more fun than how it was with Mono in the draft power ranking. CJ, I hope you had a good time.
I had a blast, yeah. Thanks for having me, and you guys can definitely catch me on the weekly recap each week if you want to get more of this guy for some reason.
Damn right you can. With that being said, we're going to sign off. Thank you for watching. Leave your comments, leave your rankings down in the comment section down below. Let me know how wrong I am. Let CJ know how wrong he is, what you guys think. Love talking to you guys. Until next week with a new guest, which I already know who it is. I hope you guys enjoy because he's a good friend of mine. Very good football guy. I'm sure none of you care about. Some of you don't care about that, but you'll enjoy. Until then, I will see you guys later.
Peace.